Hi, this is Paul with To Live For. I am extremely delighted, have been excited for days for this interview to introduce to our audience Seth Leaf Pruzansky. Seth, there's so many ways to describe Seth, and yet none of those descriptions really work. But what I can tell you is that To Live For is a venture about sharing love, joy, and positive vibes. And what I can tell you is that Seth absolutely every second emulates those same values. He's involved in a lot of different traditional ventures, but what you need to know about Seth, and we'll talk a little bit about those traditional ventures, but what you need to know about him is behind all that is this man who has incredible wisdom, and he is out to help heal people, our communities, and this sacred earth. Seth, welcome and thank you so much for joining us at To Live For.
Absolutely. Thank you, Paul, for having me here. You did the pronunciation of my name perfectly, by the way.
Thank you. So my wife met Seth in a local organic grocery store a few weeks ago, and she came home and said, we have got to interview this guy. He owns Tourmaline Springs. I'm like, okay. So I just put it in the back of my mind, and then a couple weeks later, we made some new friends, Antoine and Raquel, and they're like, you've got to meet Seth. He owns Tourmaline Spring. I'm like, okay, the message is getting louder and louder. And then last week I saw a video with a Facebook and a local business that I'm following, and Seth was in the video, and he spoke about his absolute delight in helping businesses succeed, and that sealed the deal for me in terms of I got to meet Seth now because he he smiles, he loves, and he just shares joy. So not sure where to start, but let's start with, I know you as someone who founded and co-owns a company called the Living Nuts. You now own Tourmaline Spring,
Yep.
and you have another initiative, the
I have many things going on. I got so many things going that it's like, and we can get back into that a little bit later. That's kind of that whole entrepreneurial mindset. But I just have to say, as you're doing the introduction and you were speaking, just the name of your show, To Live For, which I'm sure you chose that for every reason, but really in many ways it's like that's kind of the concept behind every single thing that I do. And what I mean by that, it's actually really simple. We live in a world right now that is seemingly so polarized,
yeah,
and so many people, and not just, socioeconomic, politically, spiritually, whatever, like people, individuals in and of themselves feel polarized. One day I'm like this and I feel great and everything's amazing. The other day I feel depressed. And, there's this back and forth. There's such an internal polarization going on in so many people in ways that's kind of difficult for a lot of people to come to terms with. And it's essentially, am I a victim or am I empowered? And so it's this constant process of people coming to terms with that. Do I feel empowered? Am I able to live in this world? Do I trust life? Can I be guided by life in order to make decisions that are going to support not only my well being, but that are in alignment with a greater whole? Or do I feel terrible or like a victim and all these things are happening and I just feel stuck and I can't get out of my way and all these different things? And so it's real simple. Is life worth living for? Is it to live for? Or or not, or is it worth dying? Because that's really what it comes down to. If you can ingrain that mind, if you can get that kind of philosophy into your mindset and live from that place, then no matter what comes up, no matter what challenges, no matter what kind of obstacles, while they're really hard and they can seem difficult, the more you train yourself to do this, eventually the closer you get to a place where you're like, okay, these challenges are amazing. These challenges are exactly what I needed at this point in time, what we perceive to be time, in order for me to get to experience a greater level of growth and potential that I didn't know was there. And if I didn't have that opportunity, then I wouldn't be able to get to this next point. So having that mindset of to live for something is really it.
Yeah. Uh, and it's interesting how he came up with the name of that. So you've got these different ventures, and I believe that you are involved in these different ventures as a way to make your life something to live for. But it's way beyond that. It's not
Gotcha.
about your life. It's about the people that use your product. It's about the earth. Tell me a little bit more about that. What's driving you?
So even those things, that's more absolutely, all those things are absolutely why we do all this and why I do it. But at an even deeper level, it's a spiritual thing. What does that mean? It's at the level of soul. So back to kind of what I was saying about feeling polarized, really like the ultimate polarization that happens in an individual is we struggle with coming to terms with, am I this person? Do I have this human identity? Do I believe that I'm this person and this is my life and this is what I do every single day? Or am I something else? Is there some soul or spiritual component to my existence? And now we're coming to a point where a lot more people are having these kinds of this kind of awareness or these kinds of feelings or these kinds of perceptions where they realize I'm not just who I think I am. There's something way deeper going on with my existence. And some people get to a point where they're more aware of what that is. Some aren't as aware, but many are coming into it. The more an individual becomes aware of that, the more the challenges begin to present themselves in their life for a little while. Because that's that polarizing thing. There's something there that's trying to get you to realize more than you are currently realizing at this point in time. So, let's make it simple. And I always come back to this because it's so important. It means so much. What is spirituality? It's not a belief. It's not, it's not anything that anybody has ever told us about what life is. It's the very basics. It's the simple nature of the fact that our heart is beating, our lungs are breathing, thoughts are rising in our mind. There's all these amazing cellular functions going on in our entire body. We are not doing that. The people who get up, live our 9 to 5 life, work in this world, this is not done by us. There is a profound innate intelligence that is allowing these mind blowing, complex autonomic functions to occur within and around our entire being every single day, just as it exists in the natural world all around us. So when we as individuals really, sorry, I'm going, when we choose to become aware of this and live from that place, life takes on a whole new meaning. And suddenly we're able to be guided in a way that is going to support not only our growth as an individual, but we know how to help others as well.
Okay. And that ties into to where I wanted to take this. I don't know if it's a fair word, but uh, mid husbandry,
Mm.
where I feel like you are facilitating the delivery of spiritual growth. Do you think that's a fair, if you could summarize the work, do you think that's a little accurate?
Yeah, sure, why not? I mean, there's so many different ways. It's funny because words, it the core of this stuff is very difficult to describe with words, but words are very helpful because words are like a guidepost. They're a roadmap that lead people to eventually coming to a place of experiencing it directly. So different words I work with people, I use the intellect to help unlock the intellect because as a species we're very much contained within our mind.
Right.
That's where it all begins. I mean, people are so stuck in their mind that they don't even know what it's like to be in their body, much less becoming aware of where the source of their consciousness derives from. But these things are really very simple, natural processes, and even understanding them, at an elated to an elated, profound degree, is something that we all have the ability to embody very easily and naturally. We just understand more of what's inhibiting our natural understanding of it.
How are you facilitating either the process or these discussions or helping someone unlock their intellect?
I do many, many different things, and it's funny because at different points in my life, I'm called to do it in a different way. I personally, for myself, I have a vision of how it'll eventually occur. But like they say, you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. That even though I have a lot of vision of how I can imagine things being and would like things to be, I also know that this innate intelligence that is in my body, that's causing me to perceive reality through these eyes, is exceedingly more intelligent than I am with my normal day-to-day awareness. And so it's very much a balancing act in that, the more I think I'm in control, then the more things kind of come up to remind me that I'm not really in control. But the more I abide to that, the more I trust in that guiding principle that is existing in my very being, the more I see things just fit into place, arise into place, or flow. And that's really essentially what it is that it's trying to get us to. So
You have a, you, I'm a lot blown away because you, your journey is very deep. So, do you have a daily practice? How do you wake up and run this deep journey with such enthusiasm and love for life? How are you taking care of yourself? What's,
oh my gosh, I mean, I've been definitely I'm into everything. I mean, my whole thing is I strive to live in a very balanced way. So I'm not just this like spiritual energy in a body and I'm hiding out in a cave meditating every day, like, but I've tried that and I've done that for a long time. And so I have the contrast of really engaging with the world from many different perspectives and seeing that if you don't engage with it in a way that's inclusive of everything that you have available now, it creates imbalance. And so I have, as a result of going through really harsh things in this life, which have given me beautiful contrasts, the ability to really observe my life as if I was from a distance, then it's helped me to kind of go about and do things in a more balanced way. And that's really essentially what it is. So what do I do? I mean, yes, I meditate, I exercise, I eat really healthy food. I mean, there's so many things I do. I do self acupuncture and acupressure. I do qigong. I do a lot of different things every day, and those practices evolve. Yoga, you name it, I do a lot. So, but if it really what it all essentially is this mindset. I'm always one thing I'm always doing and have always done, which doesn't always come quick to everybody, and it's a refinement of your experiential awareness of reality. So, what is this world? If I try to analyze it with just my mental faculty of what I think it is, I'm never going to get anywhere. But if I really just perceive the world without trying to break it down and think I understand it from a mental perspective, but begin to just feel what this world is, feel it from my body, because in many ways our bodies are an instruments. They're an instrument that picks up energy frequencies, that picks up vibes, that picks
absolutely.
up all these things. And so realizing that this isn't just who I am and these are the things I do and these are all the physical actions, but realizing that who you really are, don't just stop with your body, that there's a field around your body and there's a field around that field and everything has a source. So there, it's almost going back. So the more I realize that I'm perceiving reality through my senses, then what's perceiving the reality that's perceiving through these senses? And what's perceiving that reality that's perceiving that through these senses? Everything goes back. You can keep refining the way you perceive the world until you have a more clear recognition of the source of what it is that actually perceives this world. And it takes a while of coming to terms with this and understanding it, and it can be very foreign and strange to most people at first because suddenly it's this like, I'm not who I thought I was. This world is not at all what anybody has ever told me that it is. And you begin to have these epiphanies and these revelations that are very difficult for some people, many people, because we are so conditioned to
Very.
perceive reality according to the way others want us to perceive it that we have no idea, most of us have no or very little idea how to perceive reality according to the way we kind of came into this world with the ability to perceive it as. And that's where true empowerment lives. That's where the magic, you said that before, the word magic, that's where the magic is. And honestly, as amazing and as deep and profound as that stuff sounds, it's actually really not. It's very normal and natural. And the fact that it doesn't seem normal or natural in this world might be a big reason why we are so chaotic as as a species, you know?
All right, so that's a lot of wisdom. How did that come to you? Short version. And I'm wondering, did you have help along the way in terms of mentors or teachers? Are you out there? This is all just downloading to you.
So I'm gonna take a sip of pure substance on earth here.
This water, by the way, when I first tried it, it has a different energy to it than any water you can get. It uplifts you. It makes a difference. We'll have to talk about that.
Oh yeah, that's a whole other thing. It's amazing. I've gotten to a point in my life where I've been able to be clear enough to authentically represent something of this magnitude. And that's why I'm doing this now. You know, this isn't just, oh, some great business venture. It's a lot has gone into, I mean, this is very serious to me, you know? People are taking this and putting it to their body and anyway, we'll get into that later, but it's an amazing story. But so for me, where this came from, and I don't want to make this sound in any way than it isn't. So I just want to kind of give a little bit to it here, provide a little bit. I was born into this world just aware of this stuff as a child, but that's not a big deal because everybody actually is.
Right.
But I just happened to be born in an environment where my parents were just provided unconditional love to my brother and I. We lived in the woods of Maine. We grew our own food. We lived off the land. I had this perfect childhood, and my parents would take care of all my basic needs and let me know that I was loved and cared for. And then I was afforded the most wonderful gift of being able to just spend time in nature. And as a young child, for whatever reason, I figured out at an early age that if I sat at this one place in my front yard and just stared at the tree line where the trees meet the sky, I would sit there and I would stare. And the longer I would stare, then suddenly everything would get brighter and brighter and brighter until I couldn't actually see the world around me anymore. All I could see was this bright field, an energy field, literally a luminous bright field coming out of me with my heartbeat in it. And the more I would focus on it, the more aware of it I became. And in that space, I suddenly was able to understand very simple but universal truths. So even though I knew the world around me was still there, I knew that this vibrant world that I was perceiving in that moment was way more real
Right.
than that other stuff, and that everything else is in its own form and an extension of that. And so I would dwell in that and just be in it and be aware of it. And I didn't do it because anybody told me to. It just felt right. When I would get in that, it was like the peace that would overwhelm my little body at the time. I mean, I'm talking 3 years old, 4 years old. I did this for years. And I would try to tell my parents and their friends when they would come over, because I didn't have the intellect or the ability to articulate it then, but I would try to tell them like, you know, we are the same thing as the birds and the trees. They're all one. I would try to explain like it's the same thing. I would try to tell them it's all the same thing, they're like, who told you that? How do you know? And they had no idea what I was even really saying, but they knew I was serious. And as I started to grow up, I thought this only happened in one space when I would sit in the yard. Then I realized I could do it anywhere. Because I thought for some reason when I was a kid, I was like, oh, this is happening when I stare at this one place, so it's like the trees doing it to me. But then eventually I realized it isn't the trees at all. It's coming from within me.
Right.
And I'm becoming aware of it. And I'm living in this place. And then what happened as when I first started going to kindergarten, was the first like kind of brutal day of my entire life.
I
I'm not even
believe it.
joking. It was like I felt like I was put in prison. I didn't have any context for what prison was. Growing up older and getting older, I realized that that's what it was. That's what it felt like. But it was literally like I was separated from that. And while it was really a traumatic experience for me in that my parents dropped me off this place with a bunch of kids I didn't know in a brick institutional building, like just cut off from reality, from the natural world, it freaked me out. But I did realize then that this expansive state that I was experiencing contracted a lot. And I wasn't really able to access it at that point. And that kind of set me off in this path of like, why does that happen? Like what is causing that to happen? And I was very troubled by that as a young kid. And I would try to talk to my parents about it. And they had no idea what I was talking about. Then I moved. I started to get bullied really bad as a kid. And I stopped doing that meditative state. I stopped engaging in it. And because just for the simple fact that no one encouraged me to do it. I was so caught up in living in the world and doing what others wanted me to do. My parents, who, I was doing what they wanted me to do because I loved them and I trusted them and I believed them. I believed that what they wanted me to do was the right thing to do. And so I did it until eventually I got to a point where something was missing. It was missing so dramatically in my life, and I didn't know what it was. Like, what is it? Why am I disconnected from something? And anyway, from there it just gets insane. A lot happened.
We've done about 50, 55 interviews, and that's pretty common where we know as a child, we're aware as a child of uh, the unseen and that there's more to life than what we're looking at out there or what we're being told about on commercials and all that. And almost everybody loses touch with that. And then something happens that brings them back. But this is one of those interviews where we could talk for weeks and the camera would still be going. I do want to talk a little bit about this, the Tourmaline Spring, because this is different water. And this is your initiative. But as you said, you wouldn't have been able to do this a couple years ago. You weren't energetically in alignment with this because this water is divine.
It's sacred. And it's funny because people, they're like sacred living spring, sacred living water. They have no idea what I'm talking about. And then when I explain it to them, they're like, okay, yeah, maybe that stuff exists, but it's not for me. And a lot of people will be like that, the ones who aren't very open-minded, but they know there's something about it. They're like, it's so pure. Why is it that pure? How is that happening? And so it's really interesting. But for me, I had to go through a lot in my life, a lot to basically, as we were saying before, show me all these different contrasts so that I could know who and what, know what I really am first and foremost. When you live from this place of what you are, not who you are, because everybody thinks they're this person. This is my human identity. I'm Seth. I'm this person. This is what I do. I live in the world. But when you realize that's who you are, it's not what you are. And that what you are is literally this source of energy, this ineffable, impossible to describe or understand from a mental perspective without the experiential understanding of it first, then who you are can't really develop to the extent that it has the potential to. So it's not about getting rid of the ego, as everybody calls it now. It's just it's understanding that you are this source of awareness first, living from that place. Then the person that you are develops from that place after. You begin to live with virtues of loving others, of caring, of compassion, of, wanting this discernment, a wise discernment of how you conduct yourself in this world. Because you realize that you are not just you, and that this world that you perceive is a part of who and what you are. And really, we're trying to heal this world.
Exactly.
And so I had to go through an intense purification process where I basically spent a few years meditating every single day, hours every day, just reversing the world, as I call it, getting back to this place where, okay, I'm not going to live from this egotistical perspective of who I think I am. I'm going to be what I am. And when I finally got to that point of living as a soul with my human self coming as an extension from that, then suddenly things began to happen. And
I love the expression you use, reverse the world.
yeah, yeah. And that, I mean, I could go into that. That's a whole other thing, but that's essentially what it is. We're so used to perceiving everything from the outside in that we've forgotten that really it's about learning to perceive reality from the inside out. Because again, if everything is tracing back to the source of what perceives reality, and if every individual were perceiving reality from inside of themselves, then the world would be totally different, because you wouldn't want to hurt anybody else, because you know that it's just completely insane, because you're hurting yourself. You're literally hurting a part of yourself. This isn't spiritual ideology or philosophy. These are experiential facts. When you exist from this place where you become aware of it. It's a fact, it's a universal law, But as a species, we have generationally evolved with such a limited understanding of this stuff that most people think what is normal is just it, and it's not normal.
Right.
And what is really truly normal would blow their minds just because it's so foreign to them at first. So I had to get to a point where it's like this full circle thing going all the way back to my childhood and just coming to the place of full realization that I am this energy source. That's the source of everything. And as long as I can live from that place, then my thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and actions, and the way I conduct myself in this world is an extension of that. And so the way I talk to people and interact with them, or the way I do just basic practical day-to-day things like organizing my paperwork, my bookkeeping, everything is imbued with that awareness. And so it all becomes part of it. And people, it's funny because people are like, oh, well, I don't have time for spirituality. It's like, what do you mean? There's nothing else, There's nothing else. Well, I have to go to work. And so you can do all that. You can do all that and be spiritual, what we're calling spiritual,
Right.
It can be all of it. Again, it's really about what's inhibiting this natural understanding that exists in everybody, because it is just that. It's a natural understanding. It exists in every single human being that's alive. It's in all of us. It's just coming to the realization of what obstructs it that sets those apart who are living in a peaceful, expansive state or not. So this water is really, really amazing. My friend Brian bought this spring about 12 years ago, and he was able to get it from a landowner who was on the fence. She had an offer from a giant multinational corporation who wanted to buy the entire spring for, an exorbitant amount of money. She was very conflicted, because she didn't need the money, and she also didn't want to sell to them with their track record and their history. I'm not going to name any names, but she didn't want to do that. And so my friend Brian said, look, I have this vision for taking the spring, preserving the source, and bottling it in, an old-fashioned kind of way that preserves it for future generations. And she said, all right, she sold it to him. And so he literally did that. He invested a lot of money into taking this first of all, this is a high elevation spring. Most springs are really at a low elevation because that's where the aquifers pressurize them enough so the water can come up. And just so people understand the difference between an aquifer is like a rock chamber deep, deep, deep under the ground. It's not groundwater. This isn't like you go out and you drill outside or, pump water from the ground. This is water. This has been underground for at least 10,000 years. So this is old, been underground, encased in rock water. So it's a high elevation spring. It's almost 1,000 feet above sea level. Why does it's a lot of water comes up that high? I'm going to interview a hydrogeologist in a few days, and he said that 50 PhD, 50 years in the water industry. He said that he's seen thousands of springs, and he can't explain as a scientist why that much water comes that high up.
Wow.
He's seen thousands of springs around the world, doesn't understand, like it's just an anomaly against these guys who are, as well researched as somebody can be. So the water that's been under the ground is eventually, let me go back. So with the hydrologic cycle, so there's snow and rain and water and everything in the environment around that comes out. So this precipitation falls into the mountains as snow or rain, and then it melts or runs down through the layers of earth. So through the sand, the soil, and then eventually the bedrock until it lands up in that aquifer deep under the ground. So it's being filtered by all these layers of earth and rock. I mean, think about how long it takes to filter through rock, and through different fissures and things. So when it's finally deep, deep, deep under the ground, and it's under there for thousands of years, all the particulate matter, the heavy matter, the impurities, you could call it, that are in the water, just naturally float to the bottom.
Right.
And so what's left towards the top of these aquifers is just a pure state of water. And so it's pressurized until, from all the different forces under the ground are going to create pressure. And so that water is pressurized and then eventually is looking for an outlet. And it comes up through the spring. So water flows down, it doesn't flow up. So that's a lot of pressure to push that much water against gravity through almost same thing as when it went down in the earth. So it's being filtered again up through bedrock, soil, sand, silt, which acts as a filtration device that no human machine can replicate. It's Mother Nature doing it in a way that exceeds understanding. And so all the different energies and substances and everything that are inherent in the earth are imbued into this water. So it comes up again, all the particulate matter drops, and what emerges out of the top of the spring is the purest, lightest drinking substance that there is. And we have over 10 years of the most comprehensive water analysis testing to demonstrate that this isn't just, theory. There is nothing in this water. It is so pure. And people are like, they have this, oh my God, I feel so good. There's a reason for it. It is a sacred element.
And when you bottle it, you're not filtering it because it already is.
Mother Nature does everything. And so what's amazing about this vision that my friend Brian had with the water was, he contacted me and another friend because we were talking about living water and how important it is to drink water out of the ground. And we didn't know about Brian or Summit Spring or any of that stuff. And he actually applied for an exemption from treatment. And the state said, well, nobody's ever done that before. And he was like, yes, exactly. I want to bottle water that bubbles out of the spring and put it into a bottle without doing anything to it. And they said, well, all of your testing, everything proves right. The spring has a 300-year-old history of having no issues, So they let him do it. And that's what this is. This is the exempt from treatment product. He had a different name for it back then and couldn't really sell it. He had a great vision, but just didn't know how to represent it in a way that could get it out there.
So I used to get Summit Spring water.
Yep. Yeah. It's the best water there is. And
so did you buy the business from Brian?
No. So basically what happened was I saw him, a couple of years ago, and he was like, oh, because we tried this years ago under the term raw water. That's what he wanted to call it. And I was like, no, don't call it that. Like, no one's, but it didn't work. And we walked away, and I saw him, and he was like, oh, I'm just so tired. I can't make it work, and this and that. And I said, well, let me rebrand it. I know the whole thing inside out. Let me rebrand this according to my own vision, according to the way I can more authentically communicate the integrity of what you have preserved. And he said, do it. Go ahead. And so I spent about a year putting this all together. And, how do I represent the majesty of what this spring is and of what he has done? Because nobody bottles water like that. We only take the overflow that bubbles naturally. Every other place pumps the water out of the ground. We show people that online. People don't want you to see, the other companies don't want you to see that because there's nothing to see. It's big giant pumps and boreholes, and it's not pretty.
And it's treated.
So we only take the overflow that bubbles naturally out of our spring. We gravity feed it into our bottling facility, which nobody does that. They don't gravity feed water, It's pumped in machines and through stainless steel, and then it's put into these bottles without anything done to it.
And these bottles are not traditional plastic bottles.
No. So first of all, we started with something called ENSO, and what it is it's like an additive that's put into the plastic that breaks it down, and it becomes food for anaerobic microorganisms when it's put in a landfill, which is where most bottles end up. But we're switching to an already recycled plastic, rPET it's called, because the more I research it, and for where most of our water is being sold in the Northeast, most people up here do recycle. And the people who buy our water are more apt to be people who are going to recycle instead of throw it in the trash. So we're making that transition into it. But the other thing was, okay, is the water going to absorb the plastic? Because that's a huge deal to me. And so this is what we did. We got a heavyweight plastic that's blown off gas, and it's off gas for 3 to 4 weeks before it's cold filled. And so by that time, all the BPAs, because bisphenol A, everyone's like, oh, is it BPA free? Yes, it's certified BPA free. It's all that, but BPA is one chemical plasticizer of hundreds. It's just the one that people know about, and so that's the only one they're aware of. But there's so many other ones. But so what we did is once that was done, we test the water, after it's been in the bottle for a while, and non-detectable levels of every single chemical concern that anybody's concerned about. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. And people are like, oh, you're going to use glass, and we will probably do glass locally. We tried doing this in glass way back, but the issue with glass is that from an environmental perspective, there's something called a capacity to weight ratio. Glass is actually way less environmentally friendly than this is for our business model because it weighs so much. There's so much more petroleum to produce it. There's so much more petroleum and weight in shipping it and trucking it. There's a lot that goes into it. And sorry, go ahead. You're going to say something.
No, I am in awe of your awareness of the complexities that you have to look at when you want to do it right, when you want to serve the earth and make sure that whatever you leave behind and every footprint that you make is done out of respect, divine inspiration, guidance.
Well, like I said to you earlier, I don't think we were running this, but it's really about thinking. You have to be able to think in the box, out of the box, under the box, over the box, around the box. And it's literally that. It's working your mind to consider all possibilities. And, I have purists who are like, oh, well, you're doing this. And it's like, what are you doing? What are you doing in the world to positively effectuate it? Well, it's like, okay, well, do you have a smartphone in your hand? Okay, great. There's all kinds of plastic in that. What about your shoes? Oh, okay, yeah. Look at all the plastic in your shoes and your clothes. And then suddenly they realize, ooh, I'm kind of more hypocritical. But again, it's not even about that. It comes down to this. Business is what this planet is working with right now. This is how we all function. We are all part of a system. And yeah, okay, sure, plastic, whatever, there's a few things that aren't perfect, but guess what? Does that mean that we become anti something or walk away from it? I've tried living out in the woods, living off the land, and disconnecting from society and not participating in the world. And you know what? That was great for a time being, but I don't need to do that for myself. I want to be in the world. I want to do everything that I can to help wake people up and help them realize that we have to really bring this higher perspective into this business world and into things that exist that people think are normal or just it it needs to be our higher perspective that we all have needs to be interwoven within the systems in place, no matter how imperfect they be, because that's what gives birth to creating a new and better way.
Exactly. You did say something in one of the videos I watched of you, because one of the things that I feel pain with is the materialistic stuff that's going on, the waste, the incredible waste, and all these things that we have. Just look here, we've got it. I feel the pain. I feel the pain, but you encourage me to, like you just said, to stay engaged and to try to make a difference that way instead of just kind of washing your hands and say, oh, it is what it is. But
I don't know, does being anti something like prevent it? Because it's like you can be anti something, but it's like bottled water. The bottled water industry is growing in leaps and bounds. Since the 80s, it's experienced almost double-digit growth virtually every year since its inception, and it's only getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Does being anti-bottled water make it go away? Or does being proactive and saying, guess what? 90% of the water that's out there is tap water, and most of it
exactly.
isn't even filtered tap water.
Yeah,
Like, or does being proactive mean, hey, guess what? A rare high elevation spring in the woods of Maine, setting a standard of integrity that can exist. Isn't that a much better way to vote with our money? Because
amen, brother.
isn't that what people do every day? And I tell people, they're like, oh, who'd you vote for? I said, who'd I vote for? I vote for all the local companies that exist around me. I give them my money every chance I get. Every day I spend money on local foods, local water, local products, local people who authentically carry and represent that message. If somebody lives on the other side of the world and they're doing it with heart and soul, I support them too. It's about supporting businesses with soul, with integrity, who are functioning from a bigger perspective, because that is what is needed in the world more than anything, you know?
We could go on, and I do ask almost everybody I talk with this one question. And if there's someone that's listening to this and they feel stuck or not happy or um, they want what you have, what is one thing they could do to start to tap into a different way of living or feeling better about themselves or a different awareness?
I would say,
One thing.
okay, everybody alive, no matter how successful or whatever we perceive success to be, at one point in their life probably felt really stuck. I don't think there is anybody who hasn't been exempt from feeling stuck to some degree. So realize that in that regard, we are no different than anybody else. And, you know, to the degree that we want to change our lives is what is going to facilitate it occurring quicker. Nobody's going to do for you what you need to do for yourself. So what are you going to do? Change your mind. That's the one thing. Change your mind and persevere. That's really the key, actually, right there.
I hear that a lot. That's
Yeah.
one part of the answer. Don't give up. Keep working at that change.
To live for.
To live for
it. Love it. Love it. That's the thing. I mean, first, these challenges are hard, but you know what? If you can get to a point where you love them, things happen. And so you won't believe what happens, but that's the whole thing.
You are amazing. You're full of love. You're full of joy. We appreciate your time. I want interview number 2 and number 3 lined up. But
Well, it takes one to know one. You recognize that?
thank you. But thank you so much, Seth, for your time.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you.